The math stopped working 11 days ago, and almost nobody has explained why. Not the stock market math, not the oil math, the entire global economy's math. The numbers governments, banks, families, and central banks have trusted for years. The calculations that once made perfect sense are suddenly producing the wrong answers, because a war quietly changed one of the most important variables on Earth. And when that one variable breaks, everything connected to it begins to break with it. Let me show you exactly what I mean. And stay with me, because the third number I'm going to show you is the one that affects your wallet more directly than almost anything else. Most people don't even know it exists. Start with the simplest number, 20 million. That's how many barrels of oil pass through the Strait of Hormuz every single day. 20 million barrels. 1/5 of everything the world uses flowing through a channel that is now effectively closed. 11 days ago, it was open. Today it isn't. Simon Johnson is an economist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2024, one of the highest honors in the entire field of global finance. This week he said something that every investor on Earth should write down. He said, the Strait of Hormuz has to be reopened. It's 20 million barrels of oil a day going through there. There's no excess capacity anywhere in the world that can fill that gap. Read that again. No excess capacity anywhere in the world. That means there is no backup plan, no alternative source, no country that can simply turn on a tap and replace what the strait carries every day. The global oil system was built assuming the strait would stay open. It has been open, more or less, for decades. The math worked because of that assumption. Now the assumption is gone, and the math is broken. Oil surged to a peak of nearly $120 per barrel early Monday morning before pulling back to around $90 where it is trading now. That pullback does not mean the crisis is over. It means traders are waiting for clarity on whether the strait reopens. They're not buying the optimism yet. They're just taking some chips off the table while the situation develops. Maurice Opsfeld spent years as the chief economist of the International Monetary Fund, the organization that manages financial stability for the entire planet. He looked at what's happening in the strait this week and said 4 words that sum up everything. Now we're in the nightmare scenario. A Nobel Prize winner says there's no replacement. A former IMF chief calls it the nightmare scenario. That's not media drama. That's 2 of the most qualified economists alive telling you that the global economy's most important number, the oil supply equation, no longer adds up. But here's the thing about that. Oil at $90 is already causing damage. What it's doing to the math of ordinary families in America and the UK is something the financial news channels are barely covering. That's the third number I promised you. Keep watching. Here is the number that changes the daily financial life of every working family in America and the UK, and almost nobody is talking about it clearly. The average American household spends $2,500 per year on fuel. That works out to roughly $50 a week just to fill the car. Mark Matthews, the chief economist at the National Retail Federation, confirmed that number this week. It sounds manageable until you apply the math of what oil above $100 does to it. Analysts at Evercore EC calculated something this week that stopped me cold when I read it. If oil prices stay around $100 per barrel, not $120, not $150, just $100, the resulting rise in gasoline prices will completely wipe out the benefit of Trump's 2025 tax cuts for the bottom 70% of American earners. The tax cuts that were supposed to put more money in people's pockets, gone, canceled out by oil prices for 7 out of every 10 Americans. Think about what that means. The government gave people a tax break. The war took it back. Not through any vote, not through any policy decision, through the simple, brutal math of energy prices. A 20% increase in gasoline cost an average family an extra $10 per week. That's $520 per year. For a family already stretched by 5 years of post-pandemic inflation, $520 isn't an inconvenience. It's a grocery bill. It's a utility payment. It's the money that was going to cover a car repair or a medical bill. When that money goes to the petrol station instead, something else doesn't get paid. That ripple moves through every local economy, restaurants, shops, services. That depends on people having money left over after the essentials. And here's something the UK viewers watching this need to hear directly. UK Finance Minister Rachel Reeves stood up this week and warned publicly that Britain is facing rising inflation because of the Iran war. The Bank of England, which was on track to cut interest rates this year, now faces the same impossible question as the Federal Reserve. Cut rates to help a struggling economy and let inflation run, or hold rates to fight inflation and let the economy slow. Either answer is wrong. That's not a policy problem. That's what happens when the global energy math breaks. I call this the invisible tax. It doesn't come in a letter. It doesn't get debated in Parliament or Congress. It just appears at the pump, in the supermarket, in the heating bill. And it hits the people who can least afford it the hardest and fastest. Now let me show you what this war has done to Asia. Because this part of the story will end up mattering to every investor in the world. And right now, most Western financial media isn't covering it properly. About 80% of all the oil that flows through the Strait of Hormuz goes to Asia, not Europe, not America, Asia, China, India, Japan, South Korea, the Philippines. These are the economies most directly exposed to every single barrel that can't get through the strait right now. South Korea's stock market, the Kospi, fell 20% before staging a mild recovery. 20% in days. India's currency, the rupee, hit its lowest level against the US dollar in more than 50 years. India spends $32 billion every year subsidizing fuel prices for its citizens. When oil jumps like this, that $32 billion subsidy bill expands dramatically, straining government finances at exactly the moment the economy needs support. The Washington Post reported this week that the closure of international airports across the Gulf, including Dubai, the world's busiest airport, has idled nearly 1/5 of all global air freight capacity. Not cargo ships, air freight. The planes that carry electronics, pharmaceuticals, medical equipment, and precious metals around the world. 1/5 of that capacity is sitting on the ground right now. The cost of shipping goods by air from Asia to Europe has jumped 45% since the war began. 45% in 11 days. The world's largest ocean shipping carrier, Maersk, suspended new bookings on almost all cargo in and out of the way. Oman, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia. That's effectively the entire Gulf region removed from the global shipping network. Flexport CEO Ryan Peterson said it plainly. Those containers will just sit at origin ports around the world and not get loaded. Standard Chartered's global head of research, Eric Robertson, warned investors directly this week. Do not ignore the economic impact on Asia. If this is a protracted conflict, Asia is going to feel a very difficult sting. Here is why that matters to an investor in Ohio or Manchester. Asia makes the products the world buys. If Asian manufacturing slows, supply chains tighten. If supply chains tighten while energy costs are rising, the inflation that was almost under control gets a second wind from both directions at once. This is why the global economy's math is broken. Not just the oil equation, but the manufacturing equation, the shipping equation, and the inflation equation, all at the same time. And there is one more number in this story that almost nobody is discussing yet. It's small, it's invisible, and it could end up mattering as much as oil. Let me explain what it is. Qatar produces approximately 40% of the world's helium. Helium is not a party balloon gas in the context of global economics. It is a critical industrial material used in the production of semiconductors, the chips that power every smartphone, laptop, electric vehicle, and AI data center on Earth. No helium, no chips. And Qatar's production facilities have been shut down since Iranian drone attacks on March 2nd. Not slowed, shut down. This is what Chatham House called a hidden choke point, a critical supply that nobody thought about until it disappeared. The semiconductor industry was already dealing with supply constraints coming into 2026. A sustained loss of 40% of the world's helium supply does not cause a chip shortage overnight. These things move slowly, but they move with serious force when they arrive. And the investors who see this dependency now, before it becomes a headline, are the ones who can think clearly about what it means for technology companies and their supply chains over the next 6 to 12 months. This is the pattern of every major supply crisis in history. The first thing people see is the obvious damage. Oil prices, stock market drops, currency moves. The second layer, food prices, shipping costs, manufacturing, arrives a few weeks later. The third layer, the hidden choke points like helium, the semiconductor implications, the fertilizer shortages, feeding into next season's food supply. These take months to fully materialize. By the time most investors see the third layer, the smart money is already positioned around it. That is exactly what I've spent 60 years watching. The investors who built lasting wealth were never the ones who reacted to the obvious. They were the ones who traced the chain of consequences before the crowd saw them coming. So what do? 3 clear steps, specific and starting today. The first step is to stop checking your portfolio every hour and start asking one question instead. How long does this last? That single question determines everything. Chatham House's economist said clearly this week, if oil settles in the $70 to $80 range and the strait reopens within weeks, most advanced economies absorb the shock with only 0.5 percentage points of added inflation and minimal GDP damage. If the strait stays closed and oil holds above $100, the math breaks permanently for the next 12 to 24 months. Oxford Economics advised clients directly, sell extreme moves, buy sharp dips in quality assets, and treat the 2-month window as the critical test. Right now, your job as an investor is not to make dramatic moves. It is to watch one variable, the Strait of Hormuz, and let that variable tell you which scenario you're actually in. Everything else follows from that single answer. The second step is to protect yourself from the invisible tax before it does more damage. The average American family is already losing $520 a year in extra fuel costs if oil holds near $100. For UK families, the picture is similar. Petrol prices have climbed, and the finance minister has publicly warned of more inflation ahead. Every pound or dollar sitting in a standard bank account earning nothing is losing real purchasing power right now. A high-yield savings account in the U.S. is currently paying 4.09%. A competitive cash ISA in the UK protects your tax-free allowance while keeping pace with rising prices. A 3-month Treasury bill through Treasury Direct yields 3.6% with full U.S. government backing. None of these are exciting investments. All of them are better than letting inflation quietly cancel the value of your savings while you wait for things to stabilize. The third step, and this is the one most people won't take because it requires patience in a moment that feels urgent, is to build or protect a written watch list of quality companies you want to own at lower prices. South Korea fell 20%. India's currency hit a 50-year low. Shipping costs are up 45%. These are fear-driven moves in assets tied to economies that were fundamentally healthy before February 28th. Fear-driven dislocations in healthy assets have a historical habit of reversing when the fear passes. The investors who came into COVID with a written list of great businesses they'd buy if prices fell, they bought Microsoft, Apple, Johnson & Johnson at prices they hadn't seen in years. They weren't braver than other investors. They were more prepared. Your list doesn't need to be long. 3 to 5 quality names you genuinely understand and genuinely believe in, written down, with target prices, before the opportunity arrives, not after. Your future self will look back at the decisions made in March 2026 as either the moment clarity won or the moment fear did. Save this video. The numbers I've given you today, oil peaking at $120, settling near $90, South Korea down 20%, air freight up 45%, 40% of the world's helium supply disrupted, the tax cut wipeout for 70% of American earners. These are your reference points for everything that develops. Next, subscribe to Warren Buffett University. This is where we break down the biggest financial events in the world clearly. No jargon, no confusion, just the analysis that helps you protect and grow your money. Iran war global economy 2026. Strait of Hormuz 20 million barrels. Nobel Prize economist Iran oil warning. Tax cut wiped out by oil prices. South Korea Kospi crash 20%. India rupee 50-year low. Maersk shipping suspension Gulf. Dubai airport air freight shutdown. Global semiconductor helium shortage risk. Fed impossible rate decision. UK inflation Rachel Reeves warning. Qatar helium 40% world supply. How to protect savings from oil inflation. Evercore IC tax cut analysis. High yield savings oil crisis. Invisible tax war inflation families. Oxford Economics Iran war investment advice. The global economy's math broke 11 days ago. The investors who understand how it broke are already deciding where the opportunity will appear when it gets fixed. The ones who don't are still staring at the daily number on a screen and wondering why the world suddenly stopped making sense. You understand how it broke now. That changes what you do next.